Hey guys, Dre here, back at it once again with another video blog for you, and you guys are really encouraging me to do more of these. I mean, the response to the last two, while the view counts hasn't been particularly high, I almost don't care, because the people that actually watch and give a shit are coming back to me and saying you guys want more of these. You seem to be really enjoying them, which is fantastic. It motivates me to want to make more of them, so please smash that like button, comment, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. So thank you all so much for the kind words, especially regarding the Bautista video I did last week. That went down really well, and coming from the fact that guys who don't even watch World Superbikes were giving it a shot just because they thought it might be interesting is exactly what I was aiming for. So thank you all so much for that. I really appreciate it. Now, I'm doing this again quickly because I wanted to talk about Formula One's 1000th championship race at Shanghai this past weekend, and let's call a spade here. It was terrible. I didn't enjoy it at all. Now, I know what you're thinking. Is this just going to be another race review? And this is not going to be that. One, I am not Chris Cook. I'm not ridiculously talented, creative, and have a penchant for putting Robot Wars themes over something. And that's a good thing. I love that shit, by the way. But that's not my style. I'm more informative than I am funny. But we can get into the main reasons why that race was terrible. I mean, let's call it what it was. The build-up was pedantic. It was everybody on Twitter going, "Oh, well, it isn't actually the 1000th Formula One race," or, you know, this isn't, like, if you include all the Indy 500s, the build-up was pedantic as all hell. And yeah, it's the 1000th race that counts towards a world championship. That'll do. Let F1 have its little media frenzy and have its little, you know, PR opportunity here and a marketing release. Let them have it, as far as I'm concerned. I'll get to why that actually makes this race so terrible in a minute. I mean, okay, we didn't get an interesting battle for the win. Mercedes were clearly the fastest car pretty much all weekend. Qualifying in the race, we were catfished yet again. Ferrari shit the bed, and that didn't help either because strategically they were incompetent. You know, they swapped drivers too early. They had to rely on team orders for the third race in a row, which wasn't ideal. There was a serious lack of on-track action. I mean, outside of the Verstappen-Vettel incident, which, you know, was more great racing, but only for about 15 seconds, and the fact that two cars spun it on the formation lap, which was funny more than anything else, we didn't get a lot of on-track action. And don't get me wrong, partly to blame for that, as well as the piss-poor TV director, who I think had a couple of drunk cameramen on scene in Shanghai, because the amount of times they were trying creative cutaways, trying to look cleverer than what they actually were, was laughable. The TV director was legitimately bad. You don't normally say that about Formula One, whose presentation is normally slick. So much so that when they don't get it right, we often mock them for it, like the first name, last name meme we had from last year, when they had the new set of TV graphics. Like, this race combined almost all of the poor factors of F1 that we as fans generally don't like. Poor build-up, no lead battle, no on-track action, no real case for strategical elements at play. The moment that Verstappen came in for a two-stopper, everybody just thought, fuck it, we'll all go on two-stoppers, and everyone just played it safe. And we didn't get very much on-track action that was entertaining either, and it didn't help that even the presentation was bad. Speaking of the presentation, though, that's the real reason why I didn't like this race. This was actually the most egregious thing about the weekend for me. It was terrible from a presentation standpoint, and the reason why I hated it was because it didn't feel like it was a special occasion. This is the 1000th championship race in Formula One. 1000th. It's a massive deal. It's a big deal for a sport that is now in its modern day equivalent in its 70th season now since 1950, when, you know, what we now know as Formula One in the modern era. When I say a sport that started up in 1950, you know, modern is kind of inverted commas here, but you get the gist. The lack of presentation or any extra effort to really make the Grand Prix feel special just wasn't there. Like, that's what I couldn't stand about this race. Okay, we had a photo shoot, which is now probably more famous for the meme on the F1 subreddit of Carlos Sainz stealing Charles Leclerc's seat, which was quite funny. the legends section of the board was just guys that are going to be there for every race weekend anyway. Johnny Herbert, Anthony Davidson, Karun Chandhok. Alan Prost was there. Prost got to wave the checkered flag, which was a nice touch. But Prost is in the garage for most Renault races these days anyway. Not to mention when he was with the Dams team in Formula E, he was out there for all of them as well. So it didn't feel special. And if that's your legends section, it was clear you were just making up the numbers. It wasn't so much legends, it was more pundits. I mean, you've got Martin Brundle sitting there, who's now probably more legendary as a broadcaster than he is as an actual, F1 driver in his racing career itself. No offence, Martin, but you're probably now more known as a brilliant broadcaster for the last 20 years rather than your racing career, which sadly just doesn't tell the full story. It was a bad look. You had a special 1000 branded champagne bottle. Yay. Yet another awful looking sponsor trophy that had the 1000 plastered on the bottom. We had a 60-second montage that was put in on the world feed, after the opening graphics started up, which was nice, but then you slapped them on YouTube again after the race anyway, so it didn't feel all that special. Not to mention, they've done better montages for when Brian Tyler started his new theme music last year for F1, which we all now love. They did a better montage for that on YouTube exclusively a year ago. More than a year ago, compared to what we got for this 60-second flash in the pan video footage we got for this weekend. It didn't feel special. If anything, what's actually kind of sad was the guys that seemed to care about the fact that it was race 1000 the most was the drivers. We had a bunch of them all in special helmets. George Russell had a Juan Pablo Montoya tribute, which, by the way, a driver having a Juan Pablo Montoya driver tribute makes me feel really goddamn old, and I'm 27 in August. Terrible. Alex Albon, Romain Grosjean, Charles Leclerc, both Renault drivers, they had special helmets to dedicate themselves to the 1000th Grand Prix, and it was a nice touch. About half the paddock had a special helmet for the weekend, which was a nice touch. Good to see they waived the whole drivers one design per season rule for that one. I'm glad they came to some sort of friendly arrangements on that front. Now, I don't know how much of this is down to the fact it was in China. I know they made an active effort to try and make Silverstone the 1000th Grand Prix, which, again, makes sense. The very first championship race was at Silverstone, if I remember correctly, in 1950. But let's be real here, the British Racing Drivers Club are already losing millions every year running the race in its normal time slot. Are you really going to have as many people come out for a Grand Prix weekend in April as opposed to your normal slot in July when the weather is bound to be even worse than it normally is in this country? Probably not ideal, to say the least. I mean, the fact it was in China rather than Europe, which, let's be honest, the backbone of the series is in Europe, it would probably make sense for it to be that way. That might have been a missed opportunity right there. Now, I know what you're thinking. Dre, why does this matter? You're just a broadcasting nerd, which, to be fair, I have a degree in broadcast journalism. I kind of can't avoid things like that. I had to study it for a living, for Christ's sake. I dedicated 3 years of my life for that shit, even though my degree is now my wardrobe gathering dust. But that's besides the point. This stuff matters because, look, I love sports. And I nerd out for broadcasting and presentation and the little things that can often make such a big difference. I love sports. There's not very many sports I don't watch. I was as captivated as millions of people around the world yesterday seeing Tiger Woods win his 5th Masters green jacket. And that was amazing because it felt special. Little things that other sports do to make their events stand out. It shows in the presentation and it makes you feel better about what you're watching. I grew up a huge wrestling fan. I remember in the older days of WrestleMania when the headsets they were wearing were gold and they were all in suits and ties, like proper tuxedos and bow ties. It made the event feel more special. I remember the 2014 World Cup in Brazil when we had, BBC and ITV having dueling coverage. And I remember, specifically for the final, you had ITV and Adrian Chiles, Ian Wright, and Martin O'Neill round a beach hut table talking about the World Cup final, the biggest game maybe in all of sport. And where you had the BBC, where, yeah, it's the usual guys like Gary Lineker and Alan Shearer and Rio Ferdinand and Didier Drogba, but they were, again, in suits, ties, tuxedos. You don't normally get that on football coverage. Normally it's all smart casual office wear, like shirts and trousers, fancy shoes, as far as it goes. These guys are in suits, ties, and they were dressing up for the occasion because it felt special. It looked special, it felt special, and presentation is so important for things like that, and it showed, because millions more watched the World Cup final on BBC with the names and the faces you can trust, compared to ITV, where it looked like a child job. It looked like he just didn't care as much. It was like it was a more casual setting, which works for some sports, but it's not going to work for the biggest sporting event in the world, you could argue. Like, it just doesn't look right. And I love that sometimes broadcasters go out of its way to make these things a big deal, because it should be a big deal. And again, like I said, it's a placebo effect for us, the viewer. And the fact that Formula 1 dropped the ball on this, I think, is quite irritating. Especially given that F1 has genuinely improved leaps and bounds in terms of presentation. Like, I still remember growing up having F1 having zero social media footprint whatsoever for years and years and years. Then they've started having race hashtags and a YouTube channel and media and in-house media that's actually really good. Will Buxton leading the charge on that front and grilling the grid, getting to know the drivers, putting more race highlights and old school archive footage on the internet. And, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, building bridges with brands like MotoGP that are actually friends now and they follow each other. Little things like that go a long way. And the company that behind them, Liberty Media, and the guys they've hired to do their social media, has greatly improved their footprint in the last 3 or 4 years. So for the fact that a media-owned giant hosting one of the most popular sports in the world missed the boat on Race 1000 so badly, I find egregious, and I think that's unacceptable. Like, that was the biggest problem for me with race number 1000. It felt like just another race. I can accept an F1 race being boring. The majority of them are. Us F1 fans are all masochists. We will it's like that Al Murray landlord joke where he talks about how you're 18, you've got your provisional license, you've come into the pub, you're excited to buy your first pint as an adult. It's like a Jewish kid's bar mitzvah. You go down, you sit down, you drink it, you realise that beer is terrible, and then most adults will spend their entire lives trying to find a good beer. I got that from Al Murray, the pub landlord. It's the same principle of us as F1 fans. We're masochists. We will sit through 15 boring races a year to find the 1 or 2 that are actually good. I can accept an F1 race being boring. It's going to happen. That's the way the sport is calibrated sometimes. It just makes me sad when such a special occasion just felt like another Grand Prix. Am I crazy? Have I got this wrong? Am I being way too deep about this, making a 13-minute video about F1's poor presentation? Have I finally lost my mind, or is there something actually to this? Let me know. Again, if you can find me on social media, at Twitter, at Harrison101HD. The podcast we're on, Motorsport 101, is on Facebook. Facebook.com/Motorsport101. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you like the video. All that good stuff. And of course, if you really, really like what we do here, you can back us financially on Patreon. Patreon.com/Motorsport101. $5 gets you early access to all our shows on Patreon. $10 gets you into the Supporters Club of our Discord server, where you get to listen to shows live as we record them. Very, very cool indeed. But until next time, I've been Dre. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. Sayonara. P.S. Alex Albon's drive from the pit lane was fucking fantastic. Well done, that man.